Obviously, we saw OC baseball with a big win over KU in that first game, but those two games after it were kind of tough losses to lose the series. So, what did you see from OC baseball this past week that either encouraged or concerned you?
Obviously, getting the win on Friday night was big. Kansas came in as a top 25 team, leading the Big 12. But then the weekend, just the pitching it's inconsistent. The hitting is untimely. It seems like, and we've seen this throughout the season. It seems like when a team comes out hot and gets a couple early runs, Oklahoma State hasn't been able to respond super well. I think you looked last week against OU. If they come out on top, get a couple early runs themselves, they can kind of hold on to that lead. But this weekend, they just kind of, got punched in the mouth early and just couldn't really. They tried to claw their way back there in the ninth, but just the consistency from the pitching staff has left more to be desired.
So, yeah, you talked about the pitching a little bit. Do you think that if they're going to make that postseason push, is that like the biggest thing that needs to change right now? Is there something else?
Probably, and then I guess consistency across the board, both at the plate and pitching. They're not super healthy. We knew this. They've had a couple injuries throughout the season. But yeah, it's there's less than a month left in the regular season, and they got the Big 12 tournament at the end of May. And this is a team that every year they have aspirations to make the postseason, to make a run in the postseason. Josh Holliday's kind of done that throughout since he's been the head man. But this year it looks like they're kind of missing out on opportunities to get in position. This weekend would have been a great opportunity for them to boost their resume, get a big series win against a top 25 opponent, boost their ranking, their standings in the Big 12. But opportunities to get to that postseason where they want to be are time's running out. It feels like.
Yeah, agreed. Then you have softball, who came off the upset win series. What have you learned about this, like the softball team recently?
They're fighters. Unlike the baseball team, they're never really out of the game. I think they're a team that can, whether they're down in the first inning or the seventh inning, they'll find a way to try to claw back in. Ruby Malin is the storyline. I think she's one of the best pitchers in America, and behind her, that's where their postseason hopes might dwindle a little bit. The pitching behind Malin has just not been there. She's putting up All-American numbers, has a great win-loss record, has a great ERA, but the girls behind her just haven't done as well. But this is a team that's gotten better as the season's gone on. The series win against Arizona this weekend was huge. I think they're going to put themselves in a position to host. You get the win over Oklahoma last week as well. It's been a good couple weeks for Kenny Gayasi's squad. So, what do you want? You'd rather them be doing well in April and May than in February and March. So they're on the right course for sure.
Do you think Ruby Malin's getting the attention she deserves, or is there somebody else that is also to credit for their success?
I think she's the biggest. They've got a lot of hitters that have done well. Tia Warsup has done well. A couple other girls, but she is the headliner. I think when nationally and locally, when you think about the Oklahoma State softball team in 2026, she's the one that comes to mind. She's been Big 12 Pitcher of the Week a couple times this season. I just think that she has All-American talent and resume to back it up. I think she's a player that should be invited to the professional league. And they give out these gold some kind of big honor that they get, and she's in contention to get one of those. And so I think she's the standard for Oklahoma State softball this year, and then that's it's been awesome to see.
Do you see this team as a legitimate Big 12 contender and postseason team?
I do. I think they've always been a postseason team, a team that can make a regional. But now, like I said, these last 4, 5, 6 games, they've proven that they can compete with some of the best, both in the Big 12 and then Oklahoma. Is top 5 team nationally. So they've shown they compete with the best. So I think they are a team that's going to be in contention to host a regional. They took a year off last year, but I think it's in the cards to return to hosting a softball regional in Stillwater in a couple weeks.
Yeah, that'll be cool. Switching gears to football and their spring game. Obviously, the first time we saw this revamped team for the first time coming out of the spring game, what were your biggest takeaways from the football team?
We've known this since Eric Morris took the job, but the offense is going to be spectacular, especially for these last couple of years where Because I think back in about a decade ago, Oklahoma State was known for its offense. In the past couple of years, it's with aside from Ollie Gordon, it's not been good really at all. And so I think it was very exciting to see Mestamaker throw for 260 yards, 3 touchdowns. A couple of different receivers got open and looked good. The running game was not as good as we expected, but they're also going against guys that know their running abilities and what their tendencies are. So I expect that to be better when they face other competition. That's the biggest takeaway. Defensively, I think they again know what the offense is trying to do, and so I don't know if you can get a full view of what they're actually going to do come August and September. But they've made strides there, and I think overall, it's just a revamped team. I think there's a lot of excitement and deserved excitement after what the fan base and what everybody's gone through the last 2 years.
Yeah, obviously exciting offense, but did you see any a position group that raised some red flags for you that might need some work?
I think the secondary is always going to be a struggle. I know they had Cameron Epps had a pick on the first play of the game, but he also got beat on a couple times. The cornerback room is light, just depth wise is light, and so until proven otherwise, where they can consistently look good, that's been an Achilles heel the past couple of years for this Oklahoma State defense, which across the board hasn't been great. So that's the question mark that I have going into fall camp. Is it just what strides can that secondary make, both at cornerback and at safety, and we saw that on Saturday.
So how much can we realistically take away from this spring game in translating it into fall camp and the fall season?
I wouldn't, based on, on stats or on, how many yards or tackles this guy get. I don't know if that's super relevant, but I just think the athleticism and the knowing what they're supposed to do is things that you can really take away, where receivers where they're supposed to be, where the linebackers, making the play they needed to and in right position. The defensive line getting in the backfield and just looking faster and bigger than what we've seen the past couple of years. So I think you saw a lot of that. Like I said, there's still some that we won't know until they go against a different opponent. There's some we won't know until we see it week in and week out. But I think there's still just the raw athleticism and the raw understanding of what they are supposed to do are two things that I think you can glean from Saturday's game.
There's some big hopes around what we're going to see in the fall. What would you say a realistic expectation for what we could see would be?
I think a bowl game is definitely the floor for this team. 4 total wins in the last 2 seasons. Bowl game feels like a long stretch. It would be very welcomed. And so I think getting 6 wins with this schedule, they've got a couple, winnable games at home, a couple of good road wins on the schedule. So I think 6 wins is the floor for everything. The amount of money, the amount of time, and the amount of just bodies that they brought in for this season. Coming over from North Texas and getting guys nationally. I think there's a lot of expectation to do more than that, but I think the floor is making a bowl game. I think that's definitely attainable.
Awesome. Transitioning to the transfer portal and kind of a lot of action from JC Hoyt and Steve Lutz. We can talk about JC Hoyt first. How she obviously secured 2 really big names. How do you think OSU and JC Hoyt is handling the transfer portal compared to other Big 12 women's basketball programs?
I mean, it's them and TCU are the only teams really in their own world. That's both due to the finance side of things. I think that both Audie Crooks and Liv McGill from Florida. Those are the 2 big names that they've gotten, and they both have been reported to have sizable paychecks. And so them and TCU, they've gotten good talent. They've gotten just big players. Big name players in the past couple of weeks. And so I think they're in a league of their own as far as it comes to the Big 12. What JC and her staff have done, after, losing almost the entirety of the roster from a round 2 trip to the second round of the NCAA tournament has been super impressive. I mean, it's one of the best transfer classes in college basketball this offseason, men's or women's so far. So it's just been really impressive that they've been able to maintain that success going into the this offseason.
So would you say OSU, the women's basketball team, is positioned well long-term in the current college athletics landscape with these new transfer portal additions?
It seems that way. I mean, obviously we have to see like the, return of interest and how, if you go out and spend a lot of money on 2, big name players, I think the people that are spending the money are expecting wins and expecting runs in both the Big 12 and the NCAA tournaments. And so they can show that, if you give us the players, we can make those runs and win a lot of games. I think you'll see continued, foundation and continued support, financially and in the stands and, on social media and stuff. So I think it's going to be a big season this year for the Cowgirls. And so it's kind of a, prove it season now that you've given all the weapons that you could ever ask for.
Yeah. And then transitioning to Steve Lutz and the men's basketball side, what do you think they need to do to stay competitive in recruiting moving forward?
This is the first real year for Steve Lutz to get his high school guys in, get some, really have enough time to use all of his resources, both in the transfer portal and the recruiting, high school recruiting area. And so he's done that so far. He had the top 5 high school recruiting class, and they're slowly getting guys out of the transfer portal. I think the biggest key left for Lutz is getting a true big man, a guy that can go up against, guys from Kansas, guys from Baylor, guys from Texas Tech, that have just physically dominated them in the paint. That's something that's been missing under Lutz these first 2 years. And so where he comes from, I'm not sure. There's names that continue to be floated around, that have visited, that have been talked to, but that's going to be the biggest key, I think, for Steve Lutz in year 3 to make that jump, make that trip to the NCAA tournament, and really just kind of prove himself. Is finding that paint presence that's been lacking these first 2 years.
And I know he's got a couple transfer portal additions so far. How do you think he's handled the transfer portal compared to other Big 12 programs and how he has in the past?
I think it's probably difficult for him because he does not have the resume at this level as some of his, because the Big 12 as a conference, there's a lot of guys that have been in these roles for 4, 5, 6+ years. And so whereas this is going into year 3 for him, he, has been to the NCAA tournament, at Western Kentucky, at Corpus Christi, but at the Big 12 at Oklahoma State, they've made the NIT the past couple of years, won a couple of games there, but I think that's a hard thing to sell. But he's got a fun style of offense. They're clearly making strides to improve the defense, and so I think he's doing as good as you can with a program that, aside from that one, Kate Cunningham year, has not really been relevant nationally in the last decade or so.
And then one last question. If you had to give OSU fans and just Oklahoma State sports in general a reason for optimism and one reason for concern, what would they be?
Oh, do you mean as far as with the nature?
As a whole, looking into next year.
I think David Taylor is a big thing. He had 3 national champions. They're all freshmen. They're all coming back next year, and so that automatically puts wrestling, which is one, probably the second or third biggest sport in Stillwater, into the national conversation pretty instantaneously. I mean, I know that Penn State is still doing a lot of stuff. They're just going to continue to reload, but I think next year the goal is going to be to compete with Penn State and win a team national championship in a sport that really matters for Oklahoma State fans, which is big. And then I guess just a reason for concern is that I guess baseball is the biggest. Is probably the team that's lacking the most right now. The hottest seat is Josh Holiday, an alumni, a guy that's done a lot for Oklahoma State community, Oklahoma State athletics over the past 20 years or so. And so I think having those conversations at the end of the year is going to be difficult, whether they make the NCAA tournament, whether they get ousted in the first round of the Big 12 tournament and things go terribly. I mean, whatever the end of the season looks like, it's going to be a hard conversation for Chad Weiberg and boosters and everybody to kind of come to that. Do we give them another year? Do we look elsewhere? And just those things are kind of the biggest concerns I would have as an athletics department, going into May, is what happens to the baseball program moving forward.
Awesome. Well, that's all I got. I appreciate you and your time and answering my questions.
Sure thing.